I go ahead and get started on recording. All right. Thank you, and welcome to our second session of Empowering Readers, Tools and Strategies to Support Reading Success. We're going to be dropping our tiny URL, which will take you to the home-based document and all of the resources and slides that you're gonna access through the training. And so that'll be dropped into the into our chat. And you can go ahead and follow that link to all of those resources, but we will also continue to drop them in the chat as well. So our training series today for Empowering Readers is brought to you by Open Access, as well as the Placer County Office of Education and San Jose City Unified School District. We have some wonderful presenters here today with us, and we are so excited. So we have Amanda Killian is our ed tech specialist at PCOE, and we also have Tracy Shaw Green, and Carrie Sherson was a huge part of developing the content, but will not be here today. So we wanted to make sure we gave her a shout out. But Tracy and Carrie are both AAC AT specialists, and all three of them are from Placer County Office of Ed. And then we also have Jessica Rosenberg, who is an AT specialist with San Jose City Unified School District. And Mimi and I are both from the Open Access Project, and we are both UDL AT content lead specialists. Again, thank you guys so much for being here today. As people are joining us, you will see in the chat, we're going to be dropping the tiny URL that will take you to our home-based document. So I know in our last session, we did talk about open access, so I'm not going to go into great detail, but if you weren't able to make our first session, just a quick overview that we are one of the special education resource leads within the California statewide system of support. We are really grounded in the foundational belief that with access to quality instruction, all students can engage, actively participate, and thrive within inclusive settings. So we provide professional development and coaching across the state of California in a variety of ways. One way is with universal webinars like this that we offer, but we also do go into school districts and county offices of education across the state. And if you're interested in more information, feel free to click the flyer, and it is also located in the home-based document with all those other resources as well. So we have many wonderful partners across the state. We are housed in the Placer County SELPA office. And then we also partner with Antelope Valley SELPA, North Inland SELPA, Humboldt County Office of Education, and of course, Placer County as well. And our project is funded by California Department of Ed and the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. So with all that we do, we really are committed to making our presentations as accessible as possible. We really try to model UDL in everything that we do. So for this particular presentation, you'll see simple backgrounds with high contrast text, alt images for all of our texts to support screen readers. We really do our best to provide some multiple examples and non-examples, and then we're going to hopefully get you engaged and participating as much as possible. We really encourage as much as possible. Use those reactions, add to the chat, collaborate however works best for you. And we just encourage all that wonderful participation. So for today, we've got some session objectives, and our goal is really by the end of this session for everyone to be able to really differentiate between these two concepts of ed tech and assistive technology, and we will have some time to kind of explore what that looks like, understand some of those differences, similarities, and then also different accessibility tools. Hopefully, we're going to dive into kind of making some ways to make learning materials accessible, and then really dive into how can we support reading fluency and reading comprehension with our learners, and we're going to talk about some specific tools to support access to both of those. Another visual kind of the outline for what our session objectives are today, and our session journey is going to do a little opening and overview, diving into that EdTech AT and the accessible educational materials, and then reading fluency and also reading comprehension. With all of our sessions, before we dive into content, we always like to start with an inclusive welcome. This is not something that we invented or created, but it's actually one of the strategies in the CASEL signature practice playbook. And CASEL is the Collaborative for Social Emotional Learning. But research says that when learners have a few minutes to kind of share their voice, their thoughts, ideas, connect with one another before really diving in and engaging with learning, they're much more likely to be engaged, motivated, and ready to participate. So in classrooms, inclusive welcomes can really look like a lot of different things. It can be a quick connection question. It can be an activity that's maybe connected to content from previous day, but really allows students to kind of have conversations with one another and share ideas. So lots of different ways to do that. And if you're interested in some information on how you could do that in your classroom, we have lots of information about that as well. So feel free to type it in the chat and we'll share. But today, our inclusive welcome is just a little connection question, kind of really connected to this love of reading, right? We're exploring reading with this entire learning experience, but we just really want to dive into this love of learning. So a few things for you to answer in the chat. We would love for you to introduce yourself and hear where you're from and what your background is, what your role in education is. But a few questions, and you're welcome to answer one or all. We love some collaboration here. So, what is the first book you remember loving as a child? If you could give a magical reading power to all of your students, what would it be? Or, my personal favorite, which fictional character from a book would you want to have as a student and why? My favorite one. And you are more than welcome to unmute and answer aloud or just add it into the chat. And again, I would love to hear, feel free to introduce yourself and where you're from and answer one of these questions. So we'll spend a couple minutes. Okay, there are so many good books in the chat here. The Little Engine That Could, love it. Encyclopedia Brown and Mr. Popper's Penguins. I just reread Mr. Popper's Penguins. It held up. That book is so good, so fun. My kids loved it. Purple Parrots Eating Carrots. I might have to look into that one. I don't think I know that one. Boxcar Children. Oh my gosh, I just reread this one as well. I'll Love You Forever. Go Dog Go. Judy Blume books. Yes. Okay. Love this. My personal answer was I've been reading, actually, we've already read the full Beverly Cleary series, but we're rereading it as a family. And Ramona Quimby is one of my favorite characters. And she just talks so much about, she just feels so misunderstood. And I kind of wish I could be her teacher and be like, I get you, girl. All right. Thank you guys so much for introducing and answering questions. You are welcome to keep answering questions, but for the sake of time, we're going to move on and we can keep collaborating in the chat as well. All right. So we started our last session really with this same laying that foundation of reading image as well, but we're going to bring it up again because we know the research and science of reading really shows us there are these 5 big components of reading instruction. And in session 1, we really dove into that phonemic awareness, that phonics, really essential for that accurate word reading down the line. And then for today, our session 2, we're going to extend those foundational skills into fluency, where we're really thinking about accuracy, rate, and expression and how they come together to really support that meaning. And then we'll also explore how accessible materials and technology can really strengthen fluency while building pathways to understanding. And so it's really important to keep in mind that these components really build upon one another. So that strong decoding supports that fluent reading, which opens that door to comprehension. We invite you to watch session 1. If you've missed our live version, it did go out in an email to you and is also now live on our website. So you're welcome to go back and watch that whenever you like. And again, that will cover all of the phonemic awareness and phonics materials from our last session. And then eventually after each session, they'll all be up on our website as well. So we also invite you to our 3rd session, which is going to be next Wednesday at the same time, 3 to 4:30, and we will continue our exploration on comprehension, vocabulary, all that integration, digital support, and fun things. So I'm going to hand things off to the wonderful Amanda Killian, and she's going to dive into some ed tech and accessible technology. I'm going to.
All right, thank you. Okay, so before we get into any specifics about accessible materials or technology to strengthen the classroom, I first want to talk about the different types of technology and how they relate to one another. So, two different types of technology categories, if you will, is education technology, which is more classroom specific. Then there's assistive technology, which is a little bit, it's more student specific. And then we have how they merge together. So, educational technology is just an umbrella term that encompasses a range of digital tools, platforms, and resources used to support learning and engagement for all students in the classroom. Some examples of what this might look like is the smart boards that you have, any learning management systems, educational apps, websites, any tools that are on like their Chromebooks or iPads. Assistive technology, as I mentioned, is more student specific. So it's just an umbrella term that encompasses also a range of tools and strategies, but also services that enables a student with a disability to complete a task that they would otherwise have difficulty or unable to do that task. Some examples of assistive technology are screen readers, speech to text, or switches for different types of communication and motor access. Um, One thing that, and then how they both interact with each other is through UDL or Universal Design for Learning, as we mentioned before, which is basically just a roadmap to making learning accessible for all learners. It's built on three different principles. So it's talking about multiple means of engagement, so how we motivate and involve our learners, multiple means of representation, how we present information to them, and multiple means of action and expression, how learners show what they know. And we're going to go into that deeper later on. UDL is not about creating 30 different lesson plans or 30 different assignments to fit the individual needs of your students. It's about designing our lessons with flexible options from the very beginning to empower all of our learners. A real life example of this, and stick with me because the minute I say my next sentence, you're going to be like, what the heck is she talking about? I want you to picture and think about buying a car. When you choose a car, you don't go up to the salesperson and say, I would like that one for tall people, or I would like that one for short people. You don't do that. And why is that? Because the car is designed with built-in flexibility features that allow each driver to adjust it to their own needs. You can move the seat forward and back. You can, raise it higher, lower it. You change the steering wheel. You change your mirrors. These options are embedded so you can personalize the experience without someone redesigning the entire car for you specifically. Now, why did I bring up buying cars? That's so random when we're talking about reading. Let's apply that to the classroom. If we design our curriculum with multiple ways to access it and engage it, like offering text versions, audio versions, visuals, different ways to show understanding, we're giving learners that same autonomy that we have when we're in a car. They can choose what works best for them with their strengths and preferences. And that's like the essence of universal design for learning is we're building that flexibility into the design so every student can drive their own learning journey. Okay. Thank you for sticking with me. I can't take full credit for the analogy. I kind of took the inspiration from a Shelley Moore video called End of Average. If you don't know it, I encourage you to look it up. It's such a great eye-opening video, but I kind of gave you like a little poll there. Um, so yeah, go check that out. So now that we have an idea of different technology, we kind of have a little overview of the universal design for learning. Let's look at some free and already available accessibility features that any student could use in your classroom tomorrow if we have it set up so they can interact with them. Let's see. Here's an example, and this is just a screenshot from a Chromebook. So if you have student Chromebooks, they all have access to this. These are just accessibility features. Three of them I want to highlight are select to speak, which is they can listen to text read out loud to them. Dictation, so they can speak their ideas instead of having to type or write them. And then there's a reading mode in Chrome. This will be a really good tool for kids that get a little distracted with ads or videos or anything like that. It kind of simplifies the reading for them. So I'm going to highlight a couple of these. if I can. And Emily, oh, there, never mind. I found it.
Is available. Let's
Can
move
everybody
on
hear that okay?
to speak. The select to speak feature, when turned on, gives us a speaker icon in the bottom right corner, just to the left of our clock. And when we turn that on by clicking it, we're able to put a box around anything that we want read aloud. So this makes it a lot more useful for students than the Chromebox, where it's just reading everything. If a student doesn't put a box around text, it's not going to read it. If they do put a box around text, it will read it out loud, such as right now.
Noun. The abstract science of number, quantity, and space.
And you can see that I have controls at the bottom. I can speed the reading up to 2 times the speed. And you can see I can go backwards and forwards, also pause and play. So having an on-screen reader just became very, very simple for students. What's great about this feature is if you are someone that's like me, who has a tough time sitting down and actually reading text, well, then this is for you, because I can listen and read at the same time. And for whatever reason, it connects to my learning style a lot better. The next feature that we're going to turn on and try is dictation. And this should work in just about any text field. All you need to do is go up to a text field, and in the bottom right-hand corner, once again, you're going to have that dictation icon there. And once you go ahead and press that, you're going to see that my voice is going to be picking up anything that I say in that text box until it shuts off or until I shut it off. So if I'm searching for something, Pythagorean theorem, it automatically goes into that window. This is going to work for students that are trying to write papers and are just not good at typing or writing out, but they're very good at verbalizing what it is that they want to say. So the next feature in the
So those are just 2 examples of many different accessibility features you have embedded on the Chromebook. Now, say you're in a district that doesn't use Chromebooks. Here's a different assistive technology feature through Google Chrome that you can use for a reading mode in the side panel. So this is just a quick video explaining that.
Hi teacher friends, it's Katie, and today I'm making the case for using reading mode in your Chrome side panel.
So oftentimes we'll send websites for our students to read. Sometimes these articles can be overwhelming for students. There's lots of information, there can be ads, there can be side links. Let's find a way to simplify this. We're going to click on the side panel in the top right corner of a Google Chrome browser. In the side panel, go to the drop-down menu and choose Reading Mode. Yeah, so when you do this, it's going to take the article and simplify it for your students to read. You can change the font to something that's more dyslexic friendly. You can make the font smaller or larger. You can even change the spacing so that each line is wider or more narrow, and you can even do that with the letters. You can change the background color and font color to make it easier for students to read.
Okay, so that's another example. And I know I can see some questions in the chat. Just so you know, you will have access to some of these slides. And I have linked an entire slide that has tutorial videos for each type of accessibility you can think of. I have them from Chromebooks, all the accessibility features. So that's magnifying screens, that's the select to speak, dictation, screen reader. I also have it from Microsoft because Microsoft has accessibility features as well. There's also Apple accessibility. As I just showed you, there's the built-in Chrome reading mode. In Canvas, if any of you use Canvas for your learning management system, there's a Canvas annotation tool that students can be using. Immersive Reader is another great tool that is embedded not only in Canvas, it's also embedded in Microsoft Word. So there are links here for instructional videos. And then we're about to get into how to make your materials accessible for all students. And there's an accessibility checker that you can use to make it easier on yourself. So you're not constantly asking yourself, I don't even know if this is going to be accessible for my students. You have an accessibility checker that will be able to explain it to you. So now that we've kind of talked about what the different technology is, we've talked about universal design for learning, we've looked at a couple of the many accessibility features that you have available. Now we're going to talk about how can you as the teacher build your materials to be accessible so students can use these amazing tools. Something to keep in mind is we want to follow some accessibility guidelines to make sure that they're accessible. I think it's good to provide multiple versions of assignments to make sure that no matter what learner walks in your classroom, you have a version already available and you don't have to put extra work on yourself if you build it during the beginning. And then you want to make sure you review these often to make sure they're compatible with different screen readers or other assistive technologies. And as I mentioned, there's that accessibility checker you can use to review your materials. Some things that you can do as you're building your materials. Use headings. Having a good heading structure helps screen readers and people with visual impairments understand how your document is organized. And no, making your font bigger and bolding it doesn't make it a header. So we want to make sure we're using like heading 1, heading 2, so that screen readers can understand the structure of your document. Another thing that you can add is lists. And so when I say list, I'm talking about using those built-in tools for like the numbered or bullet points. Without these tools, your document's not actually structured and screen readers won't be able to pick that up. Another way to make your materials accessible, and I think everybody should do this aside from accessibility, is meaningful hyperlinks. And what that means is you're using descriptive text to explain the link's destination instead of just giving someone a raw URL. So for example, if a student just sent you this link and it says https://www.youtube, you're like, okay, what is this video and why is my student sharing it with me? You kind of have this question of where is this going? Instead, when we use a descriptive text, I change it to Chromebook accessibility features. And when they click on that link, they know that this is the page that they're going to. They know what it's about. So that's important to do just to be meaningful with your hyperlinks. One last thing to make sure you're doing is if you have any images in your documents, you're adding alternative text. And the reason for that is if someone's using a screen reader and it hovers over an image, it might start saying https://www.youtube. That tells them nothing about what the image looks like. And so an example is there's this image of a young brother and a sister. So in the alternative text, we're going to put that description. So when a screen reader is reading over it, instead of reading a random URL or code, it's going to say a younger brother and sister. I would encourage you to be even more descriptive and say, you know, the younger sister's on the or the older sister's on the right with brown hair and a big smile on her face, and the younger brother is on the left and, you know, with a big smile on his face. Like, try to be descriptive of what the picture is so anyone using a screen reader can fully have it in their head of what that looks like. So now that I've just spouted out a lot of information at you, we're going to do a little reflect and share, and this is just something you can drop in the chat. So there's a few different questions. You can either answer all of them or pick one, but something I want you to think about. What is one change that you could make to any current assignment to make it more inclusive for all of your learners? What barriers are preventing you from using those accessibility tools or creating accessible materials? If you had a student walk in your class today and they needed text-to-speech to complete an assignment, could they be able to do that as your assignments are created? So let me know your thoughts. Go ahead and drop it in the chat, or you can come off mute if you would like. Love that. So I see we want to make sure that our alt text is more descriptive because sometimes we just are super vague. Yeah, I do that too. That is something I also need to work on, which is ironic because I'm the one giving this training. All right. Hopefully everyone's thinking about it. All right, we have just found out it's quite challenging to go into expert flags on Chrome settings to find Reader on my own. Could this see this being a heavy lift for students? So are you saying, Barry, that it's not directly shown up as in the video, so they have to go to a separate place?
It's pretty buried in the system.
Okay. So one thing we could do is, and this could just be taking a moment with your class of, okay, everybody, we're going to go to the three dots in the top right-hand corner. We're going to scroll down here. We're going to pin it to the top so that in the future you have it readily available to you. But that's a really good barrier to point out, is sometimes it doesn't look the same on everybody's screen. So thank you for sharing that. Then we also have providing reading in a digital format rather than just hard copy to utilize tools like text-to-speech. Yes, that is a great example of something we could change. We have making more options available for students to respond, access the standards and lessons. Love that. Text-to-speech is a great tool for students who may struggle with reading or writing and spelling. It allows them to be successful to complete an assignment. Yep. Yeah, these are all great things. Okay, awesome. I don't know if Emily, if you want to be the next person and then everyone can finish up. Thank you.
Thank you much. I'm going to pass it on to the wonderful Jessica Rosenberg, who's going to dive into fluency.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Amanda, that was amazing. Super informative. I loved it. Great reminders as well, right? With the accessibility stuff. So for fluency is super important, but it's a piece that I don't feel is really taught that much in school anymore. And especially after third grade, like I really don't think that it really is a piece. So students who really aren't very good at reading fluently tend to become less connected with the ideas that they have that they're reading, and they can't really focus on the meeting. So when we were working on fluency, we really want to help students get closer to reading fluently so that they end up getting to understanding quicker. So the definition of fluency is it's the bridge between decoding and comprehension. And fluent readers read accurately at an appropriate rate and with appropriate expression. There are three parts to reading fluency. So the accuracy is the one that most people work on, right? This is the decoding part. This is very common in K through second grade, even part of third grade, where you're recognizing and decoding words. You know, this phonics and the alphabetical principle, sight word bank. The part that the rate is how quickly and accurately someone reads, and connected text. And once they become more automatic, then their less effort is put into that automaticity, and then they can free up their brain to focus on meaning. The prosody is the expression and phrasing and rhythm that they use when they're reading. So when you put all these components together, the readers can stop focusing so much on decoding the words, and then they start moving towards reading with meaning and expression. So exactly like, Amanda and Emily were talking about at the beginning. So I would like to start by just talking about universal design for learning, which we've already kind of brought up. There are three components to it. And the first one is engagement, and then representation and action and expression. So the goal of the UDL is to proactively design our lessons to remove the barriers to learning by recognizing the learner variability that we have in our classroom, and then providing different ways for the students to engage and perceive the information, and then also show what they know. So we're going to talk a little bit about barriers that, some of the barriers there are to fluency when you look at engagement, which is the why. So some common barriers in this area would be reading anxiety or fear of mistakes. Oh, Emily, you can fly that little box in. Oh, it flew in. Yeah, you can fly both. Sorry. And then low motivation or interest, boredom or repetitive drills, a fixed mindset, meaning like I'm not a good reader or not understanding the purpose of a task. And when all of those barriers are present, unfortunately, fluency is significantly impacted. So the student really might avoid reading aloud. They might read too quickly, or they might be reading really quietly because they don't want to have anyone hear any of the decoding errors they're making, or maybe the expression isn't right. They might put really less effort into rereading or improving their expression. Show reduced attention, or maybe their automaticity isn't that fast. So, those words are not words that they automatically have in their word bank. Definitely, I see the low persistence and confidence once this is a challenge. And then they might really not understand why this is important for them to do. Like, I'm never going to read out loud. Why do I need to read with fluency? All right. So the next part of UDL is the representation. And this is the, sorry, I'm doing two things at once. Proactively designing lessons. Barry's engagement? Nope, there we go. So sorry. I have two windows open right now. I was on the wrong window. Thank you so much for understanding. So the representation is the what, and common barriers in this area are if you have weak phonics or decoding skills, limited sight words, visual tracking or print access challenges, and auditory discrimination difficulties, or maybe the text format's not accessible for the student. So these barriers definitely impact fluency, and you might have students with frequent word errors or slow, inaccurate reading, which is definitely going to cause them not to want to be engaged, at all. Rereading each word as if it's new, so they're slower when they read. A lot of students end up skipping words or lines when this starts to happen, and they show signs of fatigue when they're reading. They might start rubbing their eyes or yawning, showing that they're tired. And then they might confuse similar sounds or have difficulty recognizing like the text structure, and they're missing the meaning overall. The third part is the action and expression. And this is the last, piece of the whole umbrella of UDL. And this is the how. So when you have the how, it's, students really might struggle with fear of public reading and performance. They might struggle with limited feedback or reflection, so they've been doing it and they don't know what they have been doing wrong or had any feedback. They also might have some working memory challenges, and it might be difficult for them. Lacking self-monitoring skill tools and not being able to recognize what is happening for them when they read. And a lot of people are only practicing one way of reading fluency. So it might just be oral only. So there's definitely, obviously, these barriers, as with the past two slides, definitely will lead to some significant impact on fluency. The big, huge one is that students are going to avoid reading aloud and potentially avoid reading altogether. They might read with limited expression, most likely. And then they might not really recognize their personal progress or mistakes, maybe not because they don't know, but maybe they don't want to do it because maybe they don't have much progress with what they actually are doing. And so they are, trying to avoid that. They definitely will, lose their place easily, get distracted. And, having the opportunities to practice the fluency in different ways would be really great, but a lot of times those aren't available. So that might be doing a video or doing an audio or using interactive tools or some other way to show fluency with reading. So I've talked about a lot of barriers and what it might look like. And I'm sure, you're like, okay, that's all well and great, but what strategies might there be to help the students in these 3 areas? And, the most important factor I will say of anything, and in all my experience, is that the student really needs to feel they're in a safe place to make errors. So they're going to stumble if they have reading fluency problems, and they're going to have to agree to risk something. Doing this for them is going to be very hard. And if they don't feel safe, their fluency really will not develop well or as much as possible. So I really, really feel that relationship that you have with the students is the most important part to get them to risk trying to read out loud, especially if they have all the other barriers that we just talked about. So I'll talk about some strategies that you can use to engage the students, especially students that have anxiety or they're bored when they do this, or maybe they don't have they have low confidence. One of the things that you can do is do readers theater. And so the readers theater is, where it's sort of like a play, and you talk about, those different, you use the text, but you're showing them how to do this in more of a spoken play. Another thing super, super helpful is doing interest-based passages. I do this all the time. I find out their favorite topic and then have them read that, because usually they're more successful doing that. So have them have choice. Their independent reading level is also very important when you're doing, which I'll talk about in just a second. You can also model what it sounds like to be expressive when you're reading or monotone. Praise effort and progress is huge. Use self-set goals that the students can own, and then, have them record and reflect on it, do some recording and reflecting activities. So that is for the engagement part. Now we'll talk about the what, the representation. So this is sort of like, if you can't read fluently, you're really not going to be able to access a lot of text. So decoding or when decoding or visual processing is difficult, students are going to focus on individual words, but they're not necessarily going to focus on like the phrasing and the expression, because they're working so hard on the decoding. So some of the things we can do for them are adjusting, the font, the color, the spacing, the background contrast. Sometimes people do color-coded phonics, which can help highlight things for people. There can be paired like audio and text reading, which is similar to what what Amanda showed with the select to speak, where it's reading and it's highlighting as it reads. We can have visual scaffolds. Definitely students who have reading fluency difficulties will have vocabulary gaps. And so it's super important that you can provide glossaries or dictionaries or visuals, context cues to really help them with comprehension, and then comprehension support as well. And lastly, there's action and expression. And this one is really important, that the students have a lot of different opportunities to practice fluency. So, providing varied means of expression, we talked about recordings, digital tools, peer sharing, but it can build their ownership and confidence when they do that. Self-monitoring is super important, as long as it's positive, since this is a real struggle for them. They can also use their fluency graphs. They can build digital portfolios to see how they've progressed themselves. Checklists, rubrics for expression. They could help build the rubrics maybe by listening to fluent readers. peer feedback, integrating technology. So all of these strategies on this slide can really help remove the barriers to fluency and improvement, as well as just building a community where, you're able to risk and learn. So before I go into tools and application, I just really want you guys to think and about 2 questions, and then like you did with Amanda, just put some ideas into the chat. So the 2 questions would be, what classroom strategy or approach have you seen that I help reduce these barriers that we're talking about? You can share a word or a phrase in the chat that names that. Also, what support helps students feel successful as they work on fluency? If you're not sure about that, you can think about something that I presented, in the last couple slides, and you can put maybe one of those in there that you might want to try, or that something that caught your attention. Yes, making reading fun. Super important. Making sure they're engaged. I also don't know how many people on this slide actually teach reading fluency. It's so unusual to teach, right? Giving multiple modes of participation, love it. Definitely helpful. Joyful practice. Yeah, for sure. Right. Thank you to those who participated. We'll move on. Oh, role modeling fluency whenever I quote from the text. That's great. Absolutely. I actually have a video of that. It's super important. Hearing it read fluently is very, very important for them to hear for sure. All right. Well, we're going to move on to the next little bit, which is starting to talk about learner agency. So, you have these students who have barriers to reading fluency, and we really want them to take ownership of their reading, and fluency really starts to grow at that point. So maybe they begin to notice how fluent their reading sounds, they set their own goals, they pick the text that actually interests them. They start using strategies like rereading or recording or self-assessing. But when that student starts to feel that sense of agency, they're more motivated and engaged and confident. And so we're hoping that then that promotes them to understand that once they read more fluently, they're going to end up with stronger comprehension. So I put this in. I definitely, when I was in the classroom teaching, this was very important for me to remember when I was working on text, which is when you look at the text and what you're using it for, it's really important to remember what you're trying to have the student do. So if you're going to have the student work on fluency, it's really important that they're reading passages at their independent reading level. And that means that they're able to decode 95 to 100% of the words that they're reading. So they really should not be focusing on how to read the words. They're pretty much can decode all of them. Because when you're working with a student working on fluency and they're in their instructional or frustration level, they're just going to be bumbling along with the words and trying to decode the words, but it doesn't allow them to read fluently because they're stopping and sounding out each word. And then they become frustrated. And so maybe try to separate the two into decoding practice and fluency instruction, and just make sure that they're using text that's comfortable for them to read and they're reading it well. I definitely think that will increase their participation in the reading fluency if it's not challenging for them to read. All right. So visual tracking is one thing to really take into consideration when students are reading. The visual tracking is when our eyes move smoothly across a line of text and then down to the next line. But when students really struggle with this skill, they might skip lines, repeat lines, lose their place. Maybe they're going to misread words, have difficulty reading fluency. It happens to more people than you would think that have difficulty with the visual tracking. So some of the things you can use are reading rulers or guides or strips, which I showed a picture of one example. They can come in different colors, and some of them, this one in particular, has a line where it like helps you go line to line. A lot of my students like to use this, no matter what grade level they're in. Color overlays for the whole page that don't really have a line. Beeline Reader is an extension and it just changes the colors of the letters. So it's sort of like every letter is a different color and it helps some students. And then there is what the picture is, which we'll watch the video in a second, which is just a line focus. And so this like Visor Chrome extension, which is free, the read and write masking, screen masking. There's also line focus with immersive reader. And all of these work very similarly, but we're just going to watch like a 20-second video so you just see what Visor looks like if you wanted to add this Chrome extension for any of your students and try it out. So there isn't really anything, any voice, but you can see there's different colors. So you can change the background. You can change how dark everything is or how wide the line is that helps them focus. And you turn it on through it's through the Chrome extension website. All right. So I will tell you a story, which is, one of the reasons why I started looking so much at the visual tracking is I was an RSP teacher, and I had a student that really struggled to read. So after, a lot of hours of intervention with, reading, and she was in middle school, and I decided to try a color overlay with her because why not? So, I took out, Erlyn had this packet, and so I took it out and we looked at all the different colors, and then there was one color that we put on the text, and she just out of the blue was like, oh my gosh, the letters aren't moving when I read. And I was like, what do you mean the letters aren't moving? And she's like, they've always moved for me, and I thought that was normal. And it kind of blew my mind. So she didn't know that they had been moving, and I didn't know that that was her problem, but the color really solved that issue for her. So I will say the color that students choose to use on paper text is going to be different than what they choose on a computer, but both options are available for students. And I do recommend trying it because sometimes it solves a problem we didn't know was there. Yeah. Okay, next slide. There we go. All right. So the next part is text to speech. This is exactly like, what was talked about in the text. And then Amanda talked about this in the chat. Talking about being a model. So the text to speech is super great for being a fluent, showing fluent reading. I will say that the voices have gotten so much better. Like a lot better. They used to be very robotic, and I would say that now most of the voices are much better than that. So when students are hearing that fluent reading, they're not just listening to the words being read aloud, they're actually learning what fluent reading sounds like. I will say that research does show that using text to speech can improve their word recognition, their reading rate, and their comprehension, especially with students who struggle with decoding. But I'm going to put a little highlight there that it really is important that the student is actually having the words highlighted as it's read. Because if they're just listening, they're not going to recognize the word when it's being read to them. So, but if they're watching the words as they go, it's going to sink in, and it's more of a multi-sensory experience for the student than if they are just reading or just listening. So I highly, all of the things built in here, the built-in text readers, the read and write for Google Chrome, the immersive reader, Bookshare, Learning Out, they all have this built-in highlighting, which sometimes is called, synchronized highlighting or bimodal text reader, or, lots of different ways to say it, but super great. It reinforces that sound symbol connection and gives them the appropriate pacing and expression. So highly recommend, and it's available in so many different places now. All right. So big caveat, as I start this slide, I want to, our director of special ed, I implemented something with recording voices, and he was like, "You do have parent permission, right?" And so I was like, yeah, why? And he was like, well, you know that any audio or video recording of students becomes a part of their student record. So if a parent or if advocate or a lawyer or whomever requests the student's record, if you have recordings of students reading or videos of them reading or any of this, just please know that this becomes a part of their student record, whether they're in special ed or not, right? It's just part of their record. So just make sure that you have written parent permission for that. A lot of times at the beginning of the year, something is sent out in your classrooms, but I just wanted to remind everybody that, when you are videotaping or recording a voice, we just need to be real careful. Okay, so moving from that, it is great to use because they're able to self-monitor and they can get feedback. They can listen to themselves, hear their own progress. And I really have found it very beneficial. This is also part of research that shows that repeated reading with feedback from a teacher or peer or themselves actually is one of the most effective ways for them to improve fluency. And it also builds learner agency when they're doing it. So they'll maybe think to themselves, oh, I'll sound smoother next time, and it can be really wonderful. The phone that is sitting here is actually auditory feedback phone or a whisper phone. They are amazing and they really work. Very inexpensive, like under $10, or you can make them yourselves with PVC piping or something, but they just put it up to their ear and whisper in and can hear their fluency. There's also, Read and Write has a practice reading aloud, which we're going to watch in just a second. And then there's learning management systems. It turns out all learning management systems has some sort of fluency ability. So Google Classroom has read along. There's in Microsoft Teams for Education, there's Reading Progress and Reading Coach that you can use. Canvas has a media recorder that you can do for assignments and submit them. But we're just going to show you a little bit of the practice reading aloud with Read and Write.
This video shows how to use the Practice Reading Aloud feature in Read and Write for Google Chrome. Students can use this feature to record themselves reading, listen back to it, and even send to their teacher for feedback. In a doc, select some text and click the Practice Reading Aloud button. The text will open in a new tab with a record button and several other features. Students can listen to their text first.
Have you ever heard of James Robert Cade? Cade invented Gatorade. This drink has helped.
Or use other Read and Write supports on the Practice Reading Aloud page. Click the record button to start reading. Have you ever heard of James Robert Cade? Cade invented Gatorade. This drink has helped athletes stay healthy for the past 50 years. Once finished, students can listen back to their reading. They can also share the recording with their teacher for feedback. Click the Send button and then type in the teacher's email. Students can then either copy the link to the recording or click Send to send an email. Students can find their recordings in their Google Drive or OneDrive in the Text Help folder. Students can also use practice reading aloud in Google Slides and on web pages like learning management systems. To learn more about Read and Write, visit texthelp.com.
So I thought that was, it is a paid subscription, but Read and Write for Google Chrome, I find, has an amazing number of resources that students can use. In the homepage document that's been sent out, there are links to these videos and other videos as well for you guys to look at a later time. All right. So fluency tools, this is definitely, sometimes it's really hard to find passages to use for reading practice. I do recommend, it's very important, at least in our district, that you're using district adopted ELA curriculum, or, maybe they have a structured literacy program that they're using. So very often we'll look for something that's already within the district to use. But there's also opportunities to use what's I don't know if you guys have heard of Dibbles, but Dibbles is a free downloadable K-8 like reading fluency assessment from the University of Oregon, and you download it for free. And so basically they give you 3 different fluencies, so you can do it 3 times a year and you can keep track, and then they give you other practice at the same time. And I have used that for years, and it's been very helpful for me with my students when I've worked on fluency. They also have, training videos and online support. Another one is Read Naturally. This is a paid fluency program, but it's research-based, and students will listen to a fluent model. They read passages multiple times. There is comprehension as well. And the program includes built-in progress monitoring, and teachers, can see that. I will say that Dibbles also has online paid subscriptions, but I haven't found the need to use them, as I usually do the downloaded part, but you also have that option. And then lastly, we have, our district has Goalbook. I don't know how many districts have that, but if you have in your special education services some sort of a program that helps you write goals, a lot of the times if you have a fluency goal, they'll have benchmark passages for you to use. So that's another place that you can look for different passages to use. All right, and then the application. So when you're looking at, strategies and tools that build reading fluency, like was mentioned, like modeling fluent reading is super helpful and important, whether it's a teacher or a peer or an audio recording, but helping them hear that, especially with those students with fluency problems, as they're probably going to avoid reading in most, unfortunately, in many situations. Repeated readings, that's also a strategy that has been, it's research-based, where they start with a cold read and then they continue doing reading, and this, builds their accuracy rate and confidence. Then there's progress monitoring, where I do recommend students also track their growth, as it gives them personal ownership. I was a Linda Mood Bell clinician, which is structured literacy, for like a year and a half, and we did a lot of work on high frequency words, which don't make sense when you're trying to decode them. So memorizing them is very helpful. But they had like a word box that we would have, and we would flip the cards, and you'd work on 10 at a time and try to see if you could start reading them faster and faster and faster. That was definitely helpful, as those words show up all the time in text. In vocabulary instruction, definitely supports fluency as well. And then there are the scoop strategies where you can use where you're really teaching students how to read not word by word, but you're really teaching them how to read by phrasing. And so they might scoop the phrases as they read. And there's a video that I put on the sheet that just shows a teacher doing that. Very helpful. And even if you're practicing your fluency with students as you're reading, you could potentially do that as well and show them how you're scooping. So hopefully, together with all these strategies, you can create, more confident students who will start being more expressive and engaged as readers through these different pieces that we've talked about. I'd like to go to audiobooks as my last piece. I would, last but not least, I will say I absolutely love audiobooks. They are amazing and just keep me company when I'm in the car or, whatever. But I will say that they can enhance comprehension and vocabulary a lot, but they don't always improve reading fluency. So the fluency is really tied to decoding. So they might help with what it sounds like to read fluently, but they aren't helping them with decoding the words accurately and moving faster because it's only listening, right? They're not using the reading as decoding as well. So my caveat to this is love audiobooks, but I would say the majority of the students that I work with are not able to comprehend audiobooks because they have auditory comprehension problems. They might have working memory difficulties, or they have ADD or ADHD, or maybe just attention difficulties. They're easily distracted. Something's going on. And so I find that audiobooks tend to work best for at least my students. It's different for everyone, but they work better for my students when they're really just wanting to enjoy a book and not necessarily understand it completely. And so most of the time when we're looking to increase the fluency and the comprehension, I want to make sure they're also using the text reader with the highlighted text as well. So that's just my little piece on audiobooks. They're wonderful. Don't steer away from them, but just be really aware that it might not really help them with everything that you'd like them to do, except for vocabulary and reading interest and loving it is great, especially when you have the ones that are the graphic audio with the whole team of people that, read them, and they're pretty amazing. And lastly, I want you guys to just reflect. I've talked a lot. It's a lot of information for you guys. Amanda and I were, and Tracy's coming up, and we're just flying. So if you guys could please just put in the chat which tool or strategy you feel you might be most ready to try in your classroom or share with a colleague, or impact, how might the tool or approach help your students become more confident, fluent readers. Love to hear some things. And then we'll move on to reading comprehension. Excellent. Yes. Want to try practice read aloud and dibbles? Thank you, Tracy and Emily. Oh, great. I'm glad you enjoyed the perspective on audiobooks. Yeah. Chrome extensions. Yeah. Thank you so much. Excellent. Oh, I love it. Oh, this is great. I'm so excited. Well, I really, really hope that all of this information helps you guys. Share it with others. And here you go, Tracy.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate all your time and all of this. Thank you for your gems. And now the wonderful Tracy Shaw Green.
Whoa. Hello. I have the privilege of talking to you all about reading comprehension. And I just love this quote. So reading comprehension is not a skill you teach, it's a condition you create. So think about that for a second. And what does that mean to you in your classroom? What condition are you creating in your classroom to support reading comprehension? Let's move on to, let's get into it. So I have Scarborough's reading rope here, and as you can see, the process of learning how to read and moving toward reading comprehension, which is the ultimate goal, is quite complex. So the metaphor of a woven rope illustrates the interconnectedness of each strand, so as well as the complexity of helping students become skilled readers. So the top portion of the rope, which we're going to be focusing on when we talk about reading comprehension, background knowledge, vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge, are all quite abstract and require deep thinking. So, but as Jessica was talking about, like the fluency is so important to reading comprehension. So we are going to use that as kind of our backbone for when we get into comprehension. So today we're just going to go through like the definition and some of the barriers, and just kind of set up before our third session where we'll really dive into those different sections. So the definition of reading comprehension is the ability to understand, interpret, and make meaning from written text. So it involves decoding words, grasping vocabulary and sentence structure, and connecting ideas with the text and to one's own knowledge and experiences. It is the essence of reading, and it's the process of simultaneously extracting and constructing meaning through interaction and involvement with written language. It is quite complex. So thinking guided by print was, Perfetti said that in 1985. So let's continue. So back to the barriers, we're going to go to the barriers to comprehension. So let's start with engagement. So some of the barriers could be lack of connection to students' interests or background. And I think of a certain curriculum that is difficult for students, but the goal of that curriculum is not necessarily comprehension, but building skills. Texts that are too difficult leading to frustration. There's a great tool that we'll talk about later in terms of differentiating the text to each reader's skill of reading level. Limited choice in reading material. So those libraries, those classroom libraries, are there student choices based on their interests? Anxiety, low confidence, poor regulation, and then that one size fits all pacing. So that variability is not being considered when we're teaching. So let's look at the impact on the reading comprehension. Reduced motivation. Right? Students may avoid reading tasks or give up easily. Maybe there's an influx of people that want to go to the bathroom during this time. Lower persistence. They struggle to sustain attention and effort, no longer or challenging texts. Minimal self-regulation. Students don't use comprehension strategies like rereading or summarizing. So we have to teach those skills too. Important to understand when we're having difficulty with those during this time, to teach those skills. Limited personal connection. So without relevance, students fail to make meaningful text to self or text to world connection. Reducing deep comprehension. So those are probably, maybe you see some other things in the classroom. And if you do, please throw it in the chat. We'd love to hear it. Moving on to representation. Texts presented only in one format. This is a big one, I think, for us. When there's print only and no digital or audio versions available, we do have a population of students who would benefit from those digital options or audio options. So having those available is very important. Complex vocabulary or figurative language without support. Big one, right? And you probably, students with language difficulties are going to have more difficulty with that vocabulary. Lack of visual supports. So we know there are students who require this on their IEPs, visual supports like images and graphic organizers and highlighted text are really important for their comprehension. Insufficient background knowledge or cultural context to understand the text. We're going to go into this in detail when we talk about background knowledge, but very important. So the barrier may be the fonts. Maybe the student needs a dyslexic font or layouts that make decoding difficult, especially for those students who have dyslexia or the visually impaired. And no scaffolds for decoding fluency or text structure awareness. So a lot of barriers, right? So what does that impact look like for our readers? Difficult decoding. Students may spend so much effort sounding out words that they lose the meaning of the text, right? So we don't have fluency. The decoding is taking all of the energy. Poor vocabulary understanding, so unfamiliar words or complex syntax block that comprehension. They're decoding the word, maybe they have decoded it, but they don't quite understand what it means. Gaps in background knowledge. So without context or scaffolding, students can't infer meaning or connect ideas. And then limited access. Students with visual, auditory, or language processing challenges can't fully perceive or process the content. Huge one, that's a big one. And then cognitive overload. So dense and unsupported text can overwhelm working memory, reducing comprehension accuracy. And then in our action expression, the how, the barriers may be limited options for showing understanding, so only written responses, difficulty with handwriting, typing, or organizing thoughts in writing, lack of supports like speech to text, visual mapping, or oral presentations, and rigid assessment methods that don't reflect comprehension skills accurately. Yeah, Thomas is shaking his head. So the impact on reading comprehension is that we have an underestimated comprehension. So a student may understand the text, but can't show it through traditional written assessments. Reduced strategic thinking. Students may not use graphic organizers or digital tools to plan and synthesize ideas. And limited self-expression. So learners miss opportunities to explain or discuss ideas verbally or creatively, limiting comprehension growth. So this is always the best room. So what supports can we look at? We can provide choice in text, big one. So reading topics or response formats. Connect reading to students' lives, making it fun, having videos, use culturally relevant and interest-based materials. Set personal reading goals and track progress visually. So charts and badges, and making it fun and exciting. Break reading tasks into smaller, manageable steps to reduce that cognitive load. And incorporate collaborative reading activities such as those peer discussions, book clubs, or partner reads. And then use positive feedback and self-reflection tools to build confidence and persistence. I love gamification, so gamified comprehension practices. Kahoot, who doesn't love a good Kahoot? So those are games, quizzes, digital challenges, and just making it fun. Knowing that the Kahoot is not teaching, but it is supporting the learning. Okay. It says use multimodal text. provide audiobooks, videos, or read alouds alongside print and text. So I think that is a very common theme that you're going to hear. Pre-teach key vocabulary and concepts with visuals and examples. And we're going to talk more about that and show tools in our next session. Activate prior knowledge using KWL charts, and we're going to talk about that as well. Incorporate visuals and graphic organizers, model comprehension strategies like predicting, summarizing, questioning, and clarifying, and highlight or color code important information. So that annotation is really important. It can be really important for students who have difficulty with comprehension. Include captioned media and sign-supported reading when available. We don't actually have our closed captioning on, which we should try to have on as we present.
I should mention in Zoom, everyone can turn on their own closed captioning. So it's true when we're in person, we always have it on. And then I usually make an announcement, and I'm sorry, I forgot, but please do feel free to turn on your closed captioning. But good call out.
It's different with Zoom. Okay, and then our last section before we can move on. So offer multiple response formats. I love oral presentations, but that can be very nerve-wracking for some students, but could take practice. Videos, drawings, storyboards, or digital slides. Those are all great ways to incorporate multiple response formats. Provide writing scaffolds like sentence starters, huge. Graphic organizers or paragraph frames. And then use assistive technology. So speech to text, word prediction tools, or text to speech for editing. So let students create multimedia projects like digital storybooks, podcasts, or comic strips are always fun. And then allow flexible pacing and chunking of assignments. Use peer discussions and collaborative group work to build and share understanding, and include reflection activities where students explain how they understood a text. I'm going to go through one more slide, and then I think we're just going to incorporate a little reflection. So these are some factors. It's not one or two factors. There's a lot of factors that impact comprehension. So vocabulary and word recognition. I'm just going to move down here. Fluency. Huge. Background knowledge, motivation and interest, metacognitive skills, attention, and memory. So that is all of our strategies can support a student who has attention and memory difficulties. Sociocultural context, access to resources, instructional quality, huge one. Reading environment, text structured and type, text complexity, and the last one that I want to really focus on is that executive functioning. So we don't really talk a lot about executive functioning throughout this training, but I would say that executive functioning impacts all of the areas of reading instruction. And it is an area that needs to be addressed along with using all of the strategies that all of our team members are presenting to you. But we are not going to go into it in depth, but I do want to call it out as a very important part of reading instruction and the difficulties that students have when they are presented with reading material. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. So tools to support comprehension. You're going to hear text to speech a lot. So the built-in text-to-speech, like Amanda was talking about, audiobooks, which we know from Jessica, they can be great, but we don't have that text-supported information. Read and write, immersive reader and natural reader, which you've already heard about, and then highlighters and annotation. So there's those annotation tools that are embedded within Google. So there can be digital or no text, so you can use highlighters on physical paper, different colored pencils. Kids love that. But then also with technology, you can use the built-in features within Google, read and write for sure, Cami. There's voice notes within Cami, and then sticky notes are also an option. Simplified text. This is a big one. So in one of the barriers is that the complexity of the text is too much for a student. So their reading level is maybe at a second grade level, and you're reading a fifth grade or sixth grade level text. So Read and Write has a feature called Rewordify. And maybe for the next session, we can show a video. It is fantastic. So you take, text and you put in the grade level, and then it changes, simplifies the information to easily digestible text that a student can read. And Diffit also is a simplified text format that teachers have been using quite a bit recently. AI tools. And this is Amanda's laughing. So AI tools like Magic School and Brisk do have fantastic features like text levelers. They allow for students to put information in to get real world connections. There's multiple explanations, and there's a text scaffolder. And I do want to just say, in terms of AI tools, I don't know what your district or county it has approved, but these are definitely things to look into to support your teaching. Okay, so Jessica really did hit the audiobooks quite a bit. Now, audiobooks and text-to-speech, we're going to kind of talk about that. So you have a student here who he's listening to a book read aloud, and he also has the textbook in front of him. So we do see that in classrooms as well. I will say that it's a good method. If the student can follow along, that's great. But I do find that the reading, the audio information may be going at a pace that can be slowed down. So I do want to say that you can slow down the audio and the student can kind of give you input on how slow he needs it. But it can be a lot to ask for a student to follow along with the text. It does happen, and it does work for some students. But there also is, can you advance this and see if maybe I didn't give you my updated. Nope, it's okay. So this, what you see here is similar to what Jessica showed. This is Natural Reader. So there's a masking tool over the text. This is dyslexia font, and then you have the highlighted text. Though there are also, in terms of audiobooks, Learning Ally is an option for audio and text supported books. Bookshare, Read and Write has a text reader, immersive reader, and natural reader are all great options. The just plain audiobooks, there's Voice Dream Reader, Epic, and Libby. So some really nice options. And then there's just good old fashioned YouTube, which they do have some wonderful options. YouTube books can be a good option. I would like to know, just based on this initial information about comprehension, what are some things that stood out to you in terms of barriers or factors impacting comprehension? Audiobooks, some of the strategies that we talked about. We talked a lot of strategies on here. Anything that kind of jumped out at you? Go ahead and throw it in the chat. Background knowledge when it comes to text comprehension is so big, and we're going to get into that in depth in the next session. I know that you can continue to put information into the text, but I know we are going to wrap things up because we just have a few more minutes.
Yes, indeed. And you guys are welcome to kind of connect this to reading comprehension or anything, but we do want to take a couple minutes to do a quick intentional close. Again, same with our inclusive welcome. This is not a practice we created, but there is a lot of great research in really asking learners to take a couple minutes and reflect on their learning before ending. This is, again, another great strategy to use in your classrooms. And today we kind of have a couple of sentence frames that you guys can use. And that is one key insight I'm taking from today is blank, and I will apply it by blank. A situation where I can use what I learned today is blank, or I will share this learning with blank by blank. And if you would rather just reflect on your learning in your own way without that sentence frame, you're welcome to as well. So maybe take a minute to think and then go ahead and drop any ideas in the chat, or feel free to unmute as well. And while you're thinking, I'll mention just a quick shout out. Please do follow us on social media. We update with all kinds of training information, tips, tricks, resources, all kinds of fun stuff. That is all located on our home base document. In a minute, I'm going to move to our feedback survey as well. And we would really love to hear your feedback on what went well this session and what you would like for next session as well. Again, we will dive deeper into comprehension. But if you have any burning questions or anything you want us to make sure we call out, we can do that as well. But your feedback really does help in all of the trainings that we provide. We really take that feedback and use it to making new resources and things. Okay, I'm trying so hard to honor time, but I also want to allow for reflection. So feel free to add in the chat. And I also will go ahead and add our tiny URL here. So if you wouldn't mind, we're going to drop the tiny URL in the chat. You can also access it with your QR code, but we really appreciate you taking a minute to go ahead and fill out this survey. And our contact information is available. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Oh, thank you, Barry. Awesome. I love that. He says, I can investigate these accessibility tools to make a greatest hits of extensions to recommend to students, perhaps target one every couple of weeks and use them on screen in the classroom to model. Fantastic. I love that. Thank you. And thank you, Thomas. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much. And we will see you, hopefully we will see you next Wednesday, November 12th, same time for our third section, which is going to be focused on comprehension.